March 15th, 1945. Near Oppenheim, along the fog-thick banks of the Rhine, Major Wilhelm Küster leaned out the top hatch of his Panther tank, goggles off, chin high in the morning chill. Dawn had not yet broken, but the smoke of overnight artillery hung low like old breath. The air smelled of wet iron and frozen diesel. A sound, faint, like a wasp, sliced through the mist. From the east, hugging the curve of the river, came a silver streak, fast, low, and alone. A P-51 Mustang, banking so low its wingtips nearly kissed the water. It weaved under a rail bridge, then popped up just long enough to clear a bend in the bank. Küster squinted. "Foolish," he muttered. "One plane, reckless." He turned to his lieutenant and smirked. "Americans think they can frighten armor with toys." His column stretched behind him, 27 tanks, a dozen half-tracks, all under radio silence. They'd been ordered west, a final counterattack before the Allies could entrench their riverhead. They were the steel claw of the 11th Panzer, battle-hardened, cold-blooded, the last line between the Rhine and a complete American breakthrough. And here came one airplane, alone, zigzagging like a child on a bicycle. Küster turned away and dropped into the turret. "Ignore it! He's lost." He didn't know. That plane wasn't lost. It had found them. 6 hours earlier, midnight, orders crackled in over secure line from Wiesbaden. Kampfgruppe B, under Major Wilhelm Küster, was to move before first light. Objective: strike the riverhead at Oppenheim. Stop the American Third Army from bridging the East Bank. Push them back into the Rhine. It was madness. But Küster believed in madness, if it was executed with discipline. The Americans had crossed faster than anyone expected. Elements of Patton's force now held a thin wedge on the German side. A bridgehead. Dangerous, but exposed. Berlin wanted a response. Fast. Küster's battle group, drawn from remnants of the 11th Panzer, had fought in France, Poland, Kursk. They knew retreat, but they also knew armor. They had 37 tanks, 4 Panthers, 15 Panzer IVs, a mishmash of Stu-Gs and captured French carriers. And pride, old pride. "We hit them hard, at the hinge," Küster told his officers. "They fall back, the bridgehead collapses." Maps spread on the engine deck. Red pencil lines traced along woodland trails, side roads, the only paths not bombed out. The pontoon bridge east of Mainz was their lifeline. Fuel trucks were already moving. Morale was high. They had 3 advantages, Küster believed. First, fog. The river mist would blind American spotters. Second, speed. German armor, well led, could pierce even a mechanized line. Third, the Americans weren't expecting it. "They think we're broken," Küster said. "They're wrong." His men nodded. They'd seen defeat, but not surrender. Not yet. Corporal Uwe Hennecke, youngest in the group, couldn't sleep. He stared at the map, finger tracing the river bend. "It's so close," he whispered. "I could swim it." Sergeant Mertens laughed. "Only if you want to die in American machine gun fire." Hennecke shrugged. "They're not expecting us, right?" No one answered. But Küster, he believed, not just in tanks or orders. He believed in the German way. Order, steel, shock. They had lost the skies, but on the ground, they still ruled. The tanks rolled out before dawn, steel grinding asphalt, engines coughing in the cold, exhaust staining the fog. In the distance, a single plane engine roared low, following the river like a ghost. Küster didn't look up. By 5:40, the fog thickened like smoke from an unseen fire. The convoy slowed. Visibility dropped to 10 meters. Küster's Panther led the column, turret locked forward, gunner blind. Franz Mertens adjusted the dials on his radio set. Allied chatter had spiked in the last 30 minutes. Frequencies bounced like lightning. One phrase repeated, "Vector eastbound. Confirmed target near River Bend." He noted it, said nothing. Up ahead, a Panther ground to a halt. Steam hissed from its rear exhaust. The commander waved frantically. Engine overheated. "Leave it," Küster barked. "They'll fix it and catch up. We move." The bridge near Bischofsheim was worse. It had been laid just days before. 2 pontoons lashed with timber over steel drums. A Kubelwagen crossed. Then a half-track. But when the first Panzer moved on, the left pontoon dipped, buckled, and cracked with a loud groan. The entire tank lunged sideways, stopped mid-span, half-floating. Men scrambled. Küster's jaw locked. "Back it off," he ordered. 2 vehicles max on the bridge at once. Rest weight on the far side. The delay cost them 40 minutes. Mertens watched from the roadside, headphones pressed to one ear. "Still nothing overhead," he muttered. "But they're talking like they see us." Küster brushed it off. Trickery, psychological games. But even he was frowning now. Fuel was behind schedule. One tanker truck had taken a wrong turn near Hochheim. Another had been strafed 2 days earlier. Their driver refused to move without escort. The tanks were idling in fog, burning the very fuel they needed to fight. A fox darted across the road. Hennecke flinched. Someone laughed nervously. By 06:20, the last tanks had crossed. The column snaked westward, hugging the tree line. Still no aircraft. Still no sound but engines and gear shifts. Still no reason to worry. That's what Küster told himself. But Franz Mertens scribbled one line into his notebook. "They know more than we do. I feel it." The fog lifted like a curtain. By 07:10, a pale sun cracked through the trees, throwing jagged light across the frost-hardened fields. The Rhine shimmered to the south, a slow serpent of silver. Küster's column rolled in staggered formation, 2 tanks wide, kicking up dust and dew. That's when the whine came back. High pitch, sharp, closer this time. Captain Don Bryan had been airborne since before dawn. His P-51 Mustang, nose painted like a snarling shark, skimmed just above the treetops. He flew alone, first in a trio, ahead of the main flight, scanning the riverbanks for armor. He didn't need to look long. Below, tucked between tree lines and empty fields, were German tanks, maybe 30, maybe more. They crawled like beetles toward the river crossing. Bryan keyed his mic. "Vulture lead, this is Ghost. Visual on armor. Grid 2-9er. River Bend, they're rolling, boys." Static answered. Then he peeled. "Nose down, hard." He plunged toward the line, throttle full. At 100 feet, he leveled. Trees whipped past like fence posts. His guns lit up. 650 caliber Brownings stitched the lead half-track. Sparks, smoke, men scattering. He pulled up, curved around the tree line, and vanished behind a low ridge. Below, chaos. Küster stood out the turret again, yelling, "Anti-air! Fire! Fire!" Flak bursts erupted behind the Mustang's path. Too late, too far. Uwe Hennecke ducked inside the loader's hatch, heart pounding. "Sir, was that a recon?" Mertens shook his head. Too low for recon. That was a strike. Küster scanned the sky. Empty again. "Keep moving," he growled. 2 tanks had been hit. Not destroyed, but black scorch marks ran along their sides. One had a shredded track, immobilized. Mertens glanced at Küster. "He'll be back," Küster grunted. "Let him." 8 minutes later, 5 Mustangs came in formation. Low, fast, with purpose. They didn't strafe in lines. They hunted. One plane per target, focused, relentless. A tank behind Küster's exploded in fire. Another lost its commander, dragged screaming from the hatch. Küster's voice dropped. "Cut speed. Fan out. Use trees." Too late. Don Bryan circled again. Calm in the cockpit, hands firm on the stick. He wasn't just flying. He was orchestrating. The tank stopped. Engines idled beneath the trees, muffled by the soil and the smoke that hung low from burning wrecks. Küster leaned on the edge of his hatch, eyes fixed on the horizon. Across the Rhine, black dots moved like ants. American trucks, cranes, bulldozers, all flowing in rhythm. A mechanized symphony. A courier bike skidded to a halt beside his Panther. The rider handed Mertens a crumpled dispatch, intercepted from the Allied channels, and translated, "Third Army supply burn now over 2 million gallons. Oppenheim bridgehead stable. Strike plan Alpha engaged." Küster laughed once, short and dry. 2 million gallons? Ridiculous. He handed it back. Americans exaggerate everything. Gasoline as rainwater. Lies. But his eyes didn't move from the bridgehead. A second column of trucks was now visible, unloading crates, pulling cable, laying what looked like a steel mat across mud. Behind him, one of their own tankers sat silent, dry since the last ridge. He climbed down, walked to the rear of his Panther, and opened the hatch himself. He dipped a rod. Less than half. Franz Mertens checked the sky again. If they're flying this much, they're refueling somewhere nearby. Küster narrowed his eyes. Where? No Luftwaffe in days. Our airfields bombed out. They just fly. From above, another shadow streaked past. Don Bryan again, looping wider now. He wasn't attacking, just observing, or timing. Across the river, tiny parachutes descended in steady rhythm. Supplies dropped by the hundreds. Crates splashed softly into collection nets. "Mein Gott," Mertens whispered. "They're dropping fuel." Küster turned to him. Impossible. But it wasn't. The Mustang swooped once more, didn't fire, then disappeared behind the far ridge. This wasn't randomness. It was coordination. It was clockwork. And suddenly, the numbers made sense. 2 million gallons burned. Not for chaos, but to hold this ground. Hennecke stepped forward, helmet crooked, face pale. "Do we wait for fuel, sir?" Küster didn't answer, because in that moment, he wasn't thinking about fuel. He was thinking about time, and how the Americans seemed to have all of it. The map was hand-drawn, German issue, with ink too faded to trust, and roads that no longer existed. Franz Mertens laid it across the turret deck, anchoring corners with bolts. Then, from inside his coat, he pulled something strange. A captured American overlay, printed on glossy waterproof film, with colored symbols and strange shorthand. Küster leaned in. The difference was jarring. Their own map showed terrain, rivers, bridges, static, final. The American map was alive. Grid boxes, mobile supply points, icons for aerial fuel drops, temporary fuel lines, even backup routes if bridges failed. "They plan with failure in mind," Mertens murmured. "They assume they'll lose tanks, so they build to keep moving anyway." Küster said nothing. His eyes followed a red dashed line running behind the river. It wasn't a road. It was a fuel pipe. From Metz to Mainz, Over 100 kilometers. No horse teams, no rail, Mertens continued. Just pipe. Küster stepped back. For years, he had mocked the Americans, their soda machines, their chewing gum, their undisciplined lines. He had trained in Bavaria, led troops in Normandy, survived Soviet artillery at Kursk, and now a flexible map was shaking his beliefs. His boots crunched frost as he turned. On the horizon, the Mustang circled again. Not low this time. High, watching. He's not attacking, Küster thought. He's coordinating. That realization, it dug deep. This was not heroism. It was a system. Below them, Küster's men crouched near their tanks, lighting cigarettes with trembling hands. Hennecke flipped through a captured Stars and Stripes copy. Wrinkled, smudged, left behind in a field near Nancy. The front page headline read, "Fuel will win the war." The boy looked up. "Sir, do you believe that?" Küster didn't answer. He just stared at the map and saw that every road they trusted had lied to them. At 08:25, the order came. Short, brutal. Retreat immediately. Pontoon bridge destroyed. Eastern route compromised. Küster read it 3 times, lips not moving. Then he folded the slip and tucked it beneath his glove. His mouth tightened, not in anger, but in something closer to grief. They began to turn the column. It was slow, awkward. Tanks don't reverse easily. The tree line was narrow, the soil soft. Then came the shriek, high-pitched, screaming. The Mustang. Don Bryan dove in from behind, low and tight, strafing parallel to the road. He released 2 rockets. One struck the tree line, another exploded beneath a Stu-G, still trying to rotate. The blast lifted it off the ground. Inside Küster's Panther, the loader, Uwe Hennecke, curled behind the ammo crate, hands pressed to his helmet, whispering a prayer he hadn't spoken since childhood. A second Panther lost its track. A third slid into the Rhine, crushed sideways by its own weight. Men abandoned vehicles. Smoke thickened. Someone screamed orders. Another yelled for his mother. Küster said nothing. He watched the Mustang pull up, flare, and turn wide, the sun glinting off its wings like polished bone. No bombers, no tanks, no infantry, just planes and time. Behind him, Franz Mertens slumped against the comms box, his pencil broken, radio silent. "They knew," he whispered. "They knew exactly where we'd go, how we'd move, when we'd break." Küster pulled his logbook from a side pouch. He flipped past blank pages and began to write. "We were not fighting, we were performing. They watched, they recorded, they struck. Precision without passion. We were the audience." Flames from the burning tank lit the treetops in unnatural orange. Across the river, another wave of trucks rolled in, unbothered, untouched. The Americans were already building a second bridge. Küster capped his pen. His hands were trembling. He wasn't afraid of dying. He was afraid of being irrelevant. The sound of another Mustang passed overhead, but this one didn't fire. It didn't need to. 2 days later, Küster stood inside a captured American supply depot near Nierstein. His battle group had been pulled back, what was left of it, to regroup and rearm. But the depot, it was intact. The Americans had moved on, left behind crates, maps, and maintenance logs. Mertens picked through a canvas folder, labeled Red Ball Express, March Manifest. It listed trucks, drivers, routes, refill cycles, even fallback plans for when roads collapsed. "It's like they were delivering milk," he said. Küster nodded slowly, turning a page. Diagrams of jerry cans, not in liters, but in connection sizes. Fuel nozzles were standardized. Engines used interchangeable parts. He opened another crate. Inside, gaskets. Hundreds, identical. Box after box labeled with clear codes. Every tank, Mertens whispered, uses the same filter. Küster looked toward their own parked machines. One needed oil of a type only made in Düsseldorf. Another required a gearbox plate last seen in Minsk. 6 different models, 6 different nightmares. We built quality, Küster muttered. They built replacements. On a nearby wall, an American operations chart showed airdrop zones. Squares labeled by day and hour, each box corresponding to a platoon's supply quota. Their trucks weren't refueled. They were replaced. Mertens ran a hand through his hair. They move like a factory. We move like a museum. Küster said nothing. He just stared at the columns of numbers. Simple, brutal, exact. No sentiment, no doctrine, just systems. He remembered training in 39s, how they learned to shoot with precision, conserve fuel, protect the machines like gold. But America burned fuel like they brewed coffee, and still had more. Back outside, their own tanker, salvaged and coughing smoke, waited for new parts that hadn't been manufactured in 6 months. They couldn't move. The Americans couldn't stop. In the distance, a Mustang buzzed the treetops, casual, almost lazy. Küster didn't flinch. He looked up and whispered, "They don't win because they're lucky. They win because they plan to." The document Mertens unfolded was titled simply, Logistics Doctrine, U.S. 12th Army Group. It wasn't classified. It didn't need to be. Inside, diagrams, tank chassis, aircraft wings, truck beds, all interchangeable. Built to break, built to replace. They don't even try to repair, Mertens said, his voice barely a breath. They just slot in new parts and keep going. Küster ran a gloved hand along the edge of a broken Panther. The armor was thick, forged under precision and pain. Every curve handcrafted, every screw exact. Beautiful, German, and obsolete. On the next page, an assembly flowchart. One plant stamped P-51 wings. Another delivered tail sections. Engines came from somewhere else entirely, all fitted together without question. American soldiers didn't need to understand how things worked, just where to plug them in. They don't teach perfection, Mertens muttered. They teach function. Küster remembered the young men in his unit, trained for years, reading manuals like gospel, measuring tolerances by hand. He remembered Henneke's face when the Mustang struck, and he realized no amount of precision could shield them from inevitability. This wasn't warfare, it was manufacturing. The Americans didn't just have more, they had better failure. A page flipped. It showed aircraft kill lists, not by aces, but by squadron sorties. Efficiency per fuel unit, it read. Not glory, not honor, just numbers. Where's their pride? Küster asked. Mertens looked up. In the result. Outside, another Mustang passed, low and slow. The sun caught its fuselage, reflected off the rivets. Nothing fancy. Just metal. Just speed. Küster didn't admire it. He feared it. They fight like factories think, he said. No hesitation, no artistry, just endless forward. He looked down at his own hands. Grease under the nails. Blackened fingers from tightening valves by candlelight. Years of crafting war like a sculptor. And now, none of it mattered. Not against a system that didn't care about the craftsman. Only the product. The report landed on Küster's desk with a dull thud. 50 pages of after-action summaries, supply logs, casualty breakdowns. He didn't read all of it. He didn't need to. The numbers screamed. Over 3 days, the U.S. Army Air Forces had flown 14,389 sorties across the Rhine sector. Mustang squadrons led 41%, P-47 Thunderbolts another 36%. The rest, bombers, cargo, surveillance. Fuel consumed, 2.3 million gallons. German fuel delivered to the 11th Panzer during the same window, 4,000 liters. It wasn't a battle. It was a spreadsheet. His battle group lost 37 tanks. 12 were recoverable, but lacked parts. The rest were smoking carcasses, stripped of radios, left behind like carcasses in the snow. U.S. losses in the same window. 11 aircraft damaged, none lost. He turned the page. A quote from a field commander in Patton's Third Army. "We'll burn 10,000 gallons to destroy one tank. If it keeps our boys safe, it's worth it." Küster sat back. He could still feel the tremor of the Mustang's strafing run, the way it rippled through the soil like distant thunder. He remembered Henneke's stunned silence, Mertens' disbelief, the heat of burning oil against his face. And he remembered something deeper. That moment, sitting in silence, when the second wave didn't even fire. They circled instead, just watching. Confident, calculated. He turned to his logbook, wrote slowly, carefully. They burned fuel like they had oceans of it. We counted every drop like blood. They traded gas for time, time for ground, ground for victory. Another page, a footnote. The Mustang formation over Oppenheim was led by Captain Don Bryan, 362nd Fighter Group. Küster underlined the name. He hadn't seen the man's face, only the aircraft, silver, shark-nosed, merciless. But that name would stay, because in the end, one plane started it. The collapse, the scramble, the retreat. Not because of what it destroyed, but because of what it revealed. That Germany wasn't fighting an army. It was fighting a civilization. Years later, in a quiet room in Freiburg, Küster found the name again. A veteran's memoir, thin paperback, no propaganda, no glory, just stories. Don Bryan, 362nd Fighter Group, flew 146 missions, strafing specialist, known for flying low, real low. One page described his favorite tactic: hugging rivers, skimming treetops, dipping under bridges. Pilots called it threading the needle, dangerous, bold, reckless. Küster stared at the page. He remembered that morning. The glint of silver. The Mustang ducking under the rail bridge like a daredevil or a surgeon. Not wild, not random, precise. The memoir included a line from Bryan's own flight log, dated March 15th, 1945. Light resistance. Hit 3 vehicles. Out of ammo. Fuel critical. Returned. Just another mission. To Küster, it had shattered a campaign. He closed the book, rubbed his temple. Outside, children played in the street, American tourists among them, laughing, careless. One wore a T-shirt with a Mustang silhouette, nose painted like a shark. He smiled, faintly, bitterly. "They never fought like us," he whispered. "They didn't have to." Because while the Germans trained men to be perfect, the Americans trained systems to win. He picked up his logbook, the one from Oppenheim, opened to the last page, and wrote, "He flew under a bridge. We had no idea. That was the beginning of the end." One last sentence, one line, bitter as rust, sharp as truth. They burned fuel like it was Coca-Cola. We counted every drop like blood.